for coming out in this Mayvember. It was 1963. I was 7.5 years old, and I just moved into another house my parents bought, much bigger. And the doorbell rang on a Saturday morning, actually a week ago from today, 53 years ago. And at the door stood this gentleman with a box of candy and flowers. And I opened the door, and he looked at me and he said, "Hello, is your father here?" And I said, "Yes. Who are you?" He says, "My name is Buddy Sims." I said, "Well, come on in." So I said to my father, "Dad, there's a man here that has flowers for you and candy." So with that, the gentleman walked into the foyer, and he said to me, "How old are you?" And I was 7.5, just about. So I said, 7. He said, "Oh, I have a boy just about your age. He's going to be 10. I'll bring him by." Now, I don't know if you know, but when you're 7 years old and someone's going to bring over a 10-year-old, you don't even play with your cousins that are that far apart in age, right? So with that, I let my father go, and the gentleman came in the house. Now, a little backstory is, my father was a charter member at a very hoity-toity country club on the North Shore, where it was a 50% Judea and Christian membership, and they were kind of strict on that. And they had a members board. When a new member come in, they'd have to go over and see if this member was, capable of being into the club, whatever, like a review board. And this one man who was being blackballed for the club, my father told the story that everybody in the club who was actually the members committee said, "Well, we don't want Buddy Sims into the club because, first of all, he owns his own business, and he's got 2 boys, and 2 boys that be running around the club tearing things up, and he's kind of a bit of a show-off. He's got a car phone." Now, a car phone in 1963, unlike what we're used to today, was kind of rare. Now, they went on and elaborated some other things. Buddy's wife has got a really deep Nazi accent, and they invent all these things. So my father stood up and he said, "Wait a minute, gentlemen, I own my own business, and I have 3 sons, and I have a car phone too." And none of this made sense to my father. It just sounded like ridiculous bullshit, So it ended up that Buddy Sims got into the club, and that's why he came over that day with the flowers and the box of candy. So that's the backstory. So 1 week later, actually 53 years ago today, the doorbell rang again at like 10:30 in the morning, and we lived in a house in Old Westbury where no one ever rang the doorbell unless it was a police officer, someone subpoenaing you for a lawsuit, or your dog just bit a neighbor or something. So when the doorbell rang, I was the youngest of 3 sons. I'm the 3rd son of the 3rd son of the 3rd son, and actually I have 5 daughters from 3 wives, so that little detail. Anyway, that's now, but this is then. I answered the door again, and there's Buddy Sims, this guy who just looked like a buddy, with a smiley face, and there's this dorky-looking skinny guy who says, "Hi, my name is David," and he was the nerdiest, skinniest looking guy you'd ever want to see. And he says, "It's my birthday today, I'm 10 years old, and my dad's going to take us to Coney Island, can you go?" Now, I look at the kid, and I'm like, there's no way I want to go anywhere with this kid, right? So he goes, "We're going to go to Coney Island, and my father's got a brand new car outside, you got to come out and see it." So I run outside in the driveway, my father had a big circle driveway, and there's this DeLorean. And I'm like, wow. I run inside, excuse me, and I go, "Dad, I'm going to Coney Island with this guy and this kid. Bye." Off we go. And I don't remember talking very much with the kid. I'm just looking at the father's car and the whole 9 yards. We get to Coney Island. Now, I didn't know what Coney Island was, Coney Island is, but this guy, Buddy's going to take me and David, his son, who's not only 3 years older than me, but he's much taller than me, and I'm a little kid. And I spoke to David today. I said to him, "How is it that we became friends 3 years apart?" He goes, "Well, you were a very mature 7-year-old, and I was a very immature 10-year-old. So we met in the middle." So with that, Buddy takes us to this cyclone, and I see this wooden roller coaster like I've never seen anything like this in my life, right? And it's making noise that reminded me of my Aunt Melba used to take me on the subway in New York, and the noise is, and we're going to go on this thing called the cyclone, right? So we get on this thing. I don't know if there's any reasons why children can or good on it. We get on this thing, and thank God we sit in one car, and Buddy, the father, sits in the back car. Buddy looked just like the kind of guy, to this day, he's 96 years old, he just turned 96 this last week. He still looks like a guy who would be named Buddy. His real name is Bertram Sims, but he looks like Buddy all the way. Saminsky, they changed the name when they came over a million years ago. Anyway, we're on this roller coaster, and I don't know if you folks know roller coasters at all, but this thing was built in 1927, and it's probably the most vicious thing that's ever been on the planet for taking people and shaking the crap out of them. Well, we're going over these rides. If it wasn't for Buddy holding onto the back of our shirts, I wouldn't be here now. I'm convinced. We were elevating up and down, and it was one of those rides that seemed like it would never end, and you can't yell out, stop the ride, like you did when you were a little kid. Well, we survived that ride, and we became friends. And unusually, David went to boarding school. He told me his parents didn't like him or his brother, so they sent him off to boarding school in summer camp. And he lived 7 miles away from me, which is quite a big distance, not like a neighborhood kid. So, spin ahead 12, a couple years later, I'm like 12, David's like 15, right? And his father had a brand new cell phone, this was called the automatic telephone service. You had to wait for a dial tone. The machine that was the phone was this giant, big item that went in the trunk of the car. It had to be wired into your car. It was a complex thing. You had to spend the whole car out for a day to have these things installed. God knows, they used to cost like $5,000-$6,000 for these things back in the 60s and 70s. Well, David's father got a new one. So David called me up. He says, he's all out of breath. He's calling me and he goes, you're not going to believe what I'm doing right now. And it was a very bad connection. I said, what are you doing? You're in your father's car? Because, as kids, boys, we used to drive our father's cars when we were 9 and 10, whatever, it didn't matter. So he goes, no, I'm on my bicycle. I got my father's whole cell phone hooked up. What? He says, I'll be over there in about 15, 20 minutes. And he hangs up and he's out of breath. I'm like, I can't believe. He shows up at my house, which I have a gravel driveway, and he's on a Schwinn, they used to call them banana bikes, whatever. It had this big back seat thing, and on the back seat he had this strap mobile phone thing, and he had a front basket he put on, and on the front basket he had a 12-volt car battery with all the wiring and everything, and he rode this, forgot the bike, from East Hills all the way down Glen Cove Road, 6 miles, cutting through East Hills into Old Westbury, and he got there on this bicycle with a car phone, just because he could. So we became not only good friends, but him going to boarding school and me going to public school. You didn't see each other during those high school years, So after that fiasco, the last thing I remember about David, he came over to my mother's house, and everybody loved coming over to my mother's house, and especially my friends. And so he comes over and he had a car. Now David's driving. So he must have been like 17. And I'm like, do the math, 3 years younger. So I see him for the first time like a year or two, and we got in the car and we're driving around, and all of a sudden there's a pack of Marlboro, and he lights up a cigarette. He goes, would you like a toke? I was like, whoa, I guess we have a lot of things in common here. We're all growing up as teenagers. Well, it ended up that a few more years went by, and he got engaged very young, and I actually got married at the young age of 21, when you know everything. No matter what your parents are telling you, you're 21. So I got married, and David drove me to my first wedding in a 1953 Bentley S. He was at the collecting cars. And I rode in the back seat to this wedding at the Fox Hollow Inn. And I got married, and first time. And then soon after that, I was out with David. We were hanging out like on a Saturday, and we get together. And he said to me, where's Donna, your wife today? I said, oh, she went to the doctor's. And he goes, really? So's Beth. I said, really? What is she going to the doctor for? Oh, she's going to the OBGYN. I think Beth is pregnant. I said, oh, that's what my wife is going to, the same kind of doctor. So with that, we found out our wives are both pregnant with our first kids. So my wife, we had a due date, whatever, and we went in, and it ended up to be a C-section. And David's wife had a pre-planned C-section that was in the future. Well, I had given birth to my first-born daughter in 1979 to this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, and I was there for a whole 24-hour period because my wife had an emergency C-section, so it was a little like, disconforming, you didn't know what was going on. So after 24 hours of my wife and my being in the hospital, I walk out of North Shore Hospital about 11 o'clock at night, and lo and behold, here comes the Sinsmobile with his wife. I go, what's going on? He goes, she's due now. I said, really? I said, I know all the ropes. Oops, I know all the ropes. I said, I'll hang out with you. So, in about 4 hours later, we're in the delivery room, and our wives having both surgery, we're actually feeding our daughters. Now, I'm feeding my blonde-haired, blue-eyed Shiksta daughter, as he called her, and he's feeding his little dark-haired daughter that we were both born within 24 hours of each other, March 31st. And Sure enough, as time went on, David and I both got divorced, not just once, not just twice. But I am a member of the VFM, which is called the Veterans of Failed Marriages. And we both had 2 daughters and 2 divorces, and I stayed single for 10 years. I like to call it parole. And then I met a woman who was much younger than me, and first she said to me, after dating her, I said, I'll never get remarried ever again. I'll never have any more children. I'll never have another car or another house. I mean, I just was done with the whole thing. She said, well, if you marry me now, you get free medical and dental. She was a New York City cop. So I said, I'd rather have no teeth. Well, lo and behold, we got married, and it was the 3rd time for me. And I say, I was single for 10 years, and I like to call it parole. But now that I married a New York City police officer, I got a life sentence, but I found out a second use for handcuffs. And I had 2 more children. So I have 5 daughters from 3 wives, and I stay at Marriott's on business, so I do qualify to be a Mormon by default. And David has 3 children. He did get married a second time and another child, and so we have 5 and 3, 8 kids altogether, and we both share the fact that one of each of our daughters is never talking to us ever again for some reason we can't figure out. But that's life. We're still friends today, and today is actually his birthday, and we're best friends for life, which is 53 years. So there aren't many people that you know and you call best friends for 53 years. So it's a good thing. We call it a mitzvah. And it's a good thing, and thank you very much.